Now here's your host, Vicki St. Clair.
And welcome, everybody. Welcome. You're listening to Conversations Live with Vicki St. Clair, and today we're talking with people who have found and are walking their own path in life, as we often do. We'll end today's hour with a tattooed independent culturist and writer who says that after years of addiction, he found himself literally on his knees, lost and broken. He set out to find a new path, one that went way beyond conventional religious or spiritual doctrine, and one that was free of BS. His new book is called Indie Spiritualist. We'll also hear from Barbara Bonner. She's a consultant and a board chair at the Bar Center for Buddhist Studies. She became inspired to write a book called Inspiring Generosity. But first, I'm very pleased to welcome Helen Peppe to the show. She's an award-winning writer and photographer who began writing stories mostly about animals on scraps of butcher paper when she was knee-high to a horse. She's written a memoir described by reviewers as hilarious, dark, inspiring, poignant, depressing, uplifting, and courageous. Cy Montgomery, author of The Good Pig, says it will break your heart and then heal it again. And the memoir is called Pigs Can't Swim. Helen Peppe, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I'm very pleased to have you here. We were talking before we started about your fabulous photography, and I want to share that with our listeners before we go today. But let's look at the book, first of all. It is a memoir. It's based up until your teenage years. You grew up in the 70s, the youngest of 9 children, a rural area. Tell us a little bit about what was so special about that time and why you wanted to write a book about it.
The thing that motivated me most to write a book about it is that a lot of people have really bad things happen in their childhood. But I think the important thing is to look past that and accept it and not let it claim you so that it ruins your whole life, and to find humor in it. And growing up where we did, it was as if we were on a different planet. We weren't connected to civilization in any way. I hadn't gone into a grocery store on my own until I was married. So
Wow.
That wasn't until I was 18. And the first time that I did, I thought I was going to have a panic attack at the checkout. Even though my husband, Eric, had given me plenty of money, I still thought I couldn't possibly have enough, and that I was going to stand there and be so embarrassed. You know, it's just really people who don't understand living, just so far away and so isolated can't understand that. But we really didn't go anywhere. My sisters and as well, had the same types of fear. And I have a sister now she still doesn't have her driver's license. She still doesn't go anywhere.
Well, if you grow up so isolated, you really do not know anything else, do you? Because you're not exposed to anything else.
Correct. You do not.
And I read that you were actually working on a memoir type book about weight loss and exercise. And
Yes.
Somebody suggested to you, hey, maybe you should, look back at your childhood a little and figure out why the weight issue. So talk to us about that, how that turned around.
Well, I was writing a book, and I'm still writing it, actually. It's called Naked, Finding My Feet. And that's when I went into an MFA program with this so that I could, learn about prose and narrative, because I'd up to that point just been doing journalism. And my first faculty mentor was Deborah Marquardt, who has written a memoir that is really wonderful. And so I sent her some stuff, and it had to do with food, and she wrote back to me and said, I really think that before you can continue on Naked, that you need to start exploring why you have these food issues in the first place. And as soon as I began to write, the first chapter, actually, that I wrote was The Killing House, and it was meant to be like just a short personal essay. But once I started writing, I couldn't stop. Mm-hmm. And it just, like a sump pump is how I compare it to. I just kept gushing out these stories. She read hundreds of pages for me in that 4-month time, and I wrote the whole thing in that amount of time.
So let's talk.
It was just amazing.
Yes, it is amazing. That's definitely what they call flow, right?
Yes.
Creative flow. And very cathartic, I'm sure, for you. And so cathartic that I heard you were actually writing a sequel to this.
I am writing a sequel to this. And at first I wasn't going to begin the sequel right where I left off, but so many people have asked me, well, what happened after you left? How did you manage to leave? What was it like that first year? So I am starting it, right directly where I left off.
Mm. And let's talk about the title, Pigs Can't Swim. That's a good title, and I understand it had, it did have something to do with a pig named Waterborough. Tell us about that.
Pigs can swim, as we all know, but the reason the title is Pigs Can't Swim is because even though my family saw Waterborough swimming across the lake to escape us, they insisted that he couldn't swim. And so the title sort of is a metaphor for how my family thinks. If they hear a myth, that myth stays with them forever, regardless of all evidence to the contrary.
You are very different in your family, one of 9 siblings, as we said, but you often felt isolated, not just by location, but within the family unit, which, people think, well, you're surrounded by people, but it can be the loneliest form of isolation when you're actually with people and still feeling lonely. You were into books. Nobody else really was in your family, and you dreamt of just growing up being a writer and leaving home, which you eventually managed to do, of course. One of the questions that I had for you, you don't name your siblings in the book. You have unique names for them, like the blustery and favoured brother, the hair-twirling pretty sister, and the sister who holds grudges longer than God. Why did you choose not to name them?
It was a very difficult decision in the beginning. And as you say, it is cathartic when you're first writing about all of your issues to get it all on paper. So that first 4 months where I got it all on paper, that was the cathartic part. Then I had to figure out a way to write it so that it would have shape, and that was where the craft came in, so that it would be a thorough story of my growing up that other people could enjoy. When I first wrote it, I had to use all of my siblings' names because otherwise I felt great distance and I couldn't feel them. So then the next step was I didn't want to use my siblings' real names because I didn't want anybody to know where this was taking place and who my family was. I wanted to protect them because this wasn't about them and it wasn't about revenge. There's definitely no revenge in it at all. So at one point, I had sister 1, sister 2, sister 3. That was how I did it. But that didn't quite work either.
Right.
So I had, I spent weeks trying to figure out how I would delineate each sibling, yet not have it be hugely cumbersome. And so, at one point, I thought, well, I'll just give them different names. But when I gave them different names, that didn't work for me. I couldn't feel them in the text, and it all felt wrong, and it didn't feel right on my tongue. So instead, I chose names for them based on characteristics my parents would use when they talked about my siblings. So they would say that one of my sisters held grudges forever. They would always talk about her holding grudges. Right.
So have any of them read the book?
Yes.
And what kind of feedback have you had from them? Mixed.
Very mixed. The sister who holds grudges longer than God has been the most supportive.
Oh,
and
well, that's good.
I know, because she does hold grudges. But because she holds grudges, she remembers everything. Those people who hang on to things, they're invaluable resource for information.
Right.
So right in the very beginning, I was calling her. I sent her the first chapter. And I said, could you read this? I know you have such a good memory. Could you read this and tell me what you think?
And I asked you if you would read a passage to our listeners, and I know you're prepared to do that. So if you want to set that up for us, and then let me know when we come to the end.
Okay. Well, it begins, people should know that as a child, I was incredibly pesty very nuisancey to everybody. I asked lots of questions all the time. Nobody else in my family seemed to care about either questions or answers. And they were very willing to just go about their life doing their chores and not questioning anything. They just did it. But I had tons of questions, and I was always thinking. So I would follow my mother around or my father, just asking question after question, and I drove them crazy.
Well, you were quite a bit younger than the others, weren't you?
Yes,
yeah.
About 3 years between me and the next sister. So I was the last one, and we had a small house, not very many bedrooms, only one bathroom. So it was very, in the winter, very small confines. So you have to picture when you have all these people in the house and you have this one the youngest, just constantly badgering people. I deserve their anger.
Okay. Okay, good.
So this is where it begins. It's about the questions. Okay. Convinced of my imminent demise, and considering all the hardened brown sugar lumps and chocolate chips I'd stolen when alone in the kitchen, I asked my mother, "If I'm going to hell anyway, why does it matter if I steal?" "I swear you look for ways to be difficult," she answered, slamming the cupboard door on the baking chocolate. From the direction of the finger pointing me to my final destination during punishments, I knew that heaven was somewhere up and hell was somewhere down. But this baffled me because heat rises. If we sleep downstairs when it's too hot upstairs in the summer, I said to my mother, why is heaven up? She grabbed my shoulders in her two work-calloused hands to stare me square in the face, her eyes bloodshot from the strain of rarely answering, and said, "Stop asking so many questions." "Why does Helen have to talk so much?" my siblings complained, unanimous in their disapproval and annoyance. "She's such a dumb face. I wish she'd just shut up." "I know," my mother agreed in a rare moment of commiseration with her daughters. "Eventually, she'll get tired of it." But the questions only came faster as I grew, irritating my family and frustrating me. Did they think I was having fun, asking questions no one answered? What does it sound like in the rooms when no one is home? What do animals think? Do they know they're going to die when they see the axe? Do they feel sorry for themselves? If we need to sleep to be healthy, why do you keep waking us up? Why do the coyotes howl at night? Do you think there's another planet like Earth somewhere? Does Margaret have to haunt our house? Why didn't she go to heaven or hell instead? What color is God? What color were Adam and Eve? If Eve's punishment is women suffering through childbirth, and if God is so merciful, how come he hasn't relented by now? If hell is below us, why don't people say you can dig to hell instead of China? Do you have to go through hell to get to China? I had asked in 4th grade, "Did you wonder where I was when you had only 8 children?" And she'd answered, "No." In 6th grade, because she was always so angry with me and my teenage siblings, I asked why she'd had so many children, and she'd told all of us, that birth control methods had failed all 9 times. But the question I really wanted to ask, but never did, was, were you sad when you found out there was going to be yet another child? I didn't ask because I didn't want to hear the answer. And that's it.
I love listening to you read. We actually put the trailer on our Facebook page of you reading from your book, because you have such a unique way of doing it. I can really picture it when you're reading.
Thank you.
How has writing this changed you, Helen?
How has writing the book changed me, or just writing?
Writing this book.
Well, writing it, first there was the cathartic part, but writing it really gave me a deep sense of empathy for my poor parents. They had to put up with so much. It must have been crazy. So now when, I look at my own children, who my daughter asked tons of questions as well, I am constantly thinking, oh, my poor mother, I must have driven her crazy. So,
well, you can imagine
right?
when she gets to number 9, right? It's like, oh, here we go again.
I know. And I only have 2 children, and they're 12 years apart. So it must have been really awful having so many young ones all at the same time. And it wasn't even that she had her 9. It's that they then went and got married and had kids of their own. So there were times where in our house there were crowds in our tiny house. So it must have been extremely overwhelming for her. And, I think when I get up in the mornings, I want to do my own thing, and I have it in my head. I want to sit down and write and do this. And then if my daughter gets up, or even if my dogs, won't settle down, I will think of my mother and think she had all these kids, all these animals. She never got to do anything she wanted. What were her dreams? What did she get up thinking she wanted to do in a day and have it be ruined? So writing Pigs Can't Swim has given me really a huge depth of empathy for her, as well as my father, who didn't and who regrets not being able to have spent time with his kids at all because he had to work.
Right. Well, we said earlier that your whole goal in life really was to escape the family and become an author, and you certainly succeeded in that. But you still live out in the main area, right? You're married to your childhood sweetheart, 2 children, as you said. So what do you think is next for you? And I do want to just talk about your photography before we go. So tell us what's next on your plate.
Well, next is to write the sequel to this book, and I did just finish a YA novel as well called I Name You Rockstar, which is about a 12-year-old girl who saves a horse with a 12-year-old boy, and that's a rescue horse. And I continue to do my photography. So I continue to write every day, and I photograph horses all over the place. I was in West Suffield, Connecticut, a few weeks ago, photographing gypsy cobs for Dungarvan Feather. I do a lot of work for them, as well as just private clients throughout Maine and New Hampshire. And that's a ton of fun.
It is stunning photography. And one of the things that struck me was how you really captured the essence of the horse, because they have great spirit. And you've really captured that. And you said that's your whole goal in doing this, really.
Yes, it's not to, there's this whole, Photoshop art type of movement of where you change the backgrounds, you make them, black, or, just put backdrops behind them to get out all the interference of, fences and, what it looks like at a horse farm. And horse farms, because there's so many horses, they're not beautiful when they're in the pasture. I mean, fences get chewed, and, they come up at all odd angles around the horse, and the trees are bare, and the ground is usually not grass because the horses eat the grass down to the roots. So, it's often dirt paddocks. But I want people to feel the horse as they are. They're in the pasture. I want them to feel the heat of the dust coming up from the paddock that they're feeling and experiencing. And if I take that away and try to make it just art, then I'm taking something away from the horse. And I want always for animals to be seen as they really are in their environment. That is my goal.
Your love of animals comes through. I know that on your farm when you were growing up, all of the animals were subject to be food at some point, except the goats and the horses. And you chose to become vegetarian as a kid on that because you just were so in love with these animals. And that really does come across in your work. So what would you like listeners to know that I haven't asked you? What do you want them to take away from the book when they've read the book?
I guess I want them to take away that I want them, when they read the book, and some people miss this, and it's difficult because there's heavy subjects in the book, but I want them to see the humor in it and to see the compassion for the people around me as I'm growing up, and that as children, we can't find that empathy and compassion for the adults. As children, we really think about ourselves and our own experiences. So we have to go past that and mature. And so I want the readers to see that movement, just of aging, that when we're kids, we see all of this, and we're very self-centered, and there's these tragic things that happen. But as we mature, we can look back and see something different.
Yeah. Well,
and find the humor in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is darkness in there, but it is very inspiring in other aspects, and it is laugh out loud in places. So I think you accomplished that, Helen. You should be proud.
Thank you. Some people do not find it funny, because there's molestation in it, and other instances of child abuse, and so I've gotten a few letters from people that say, I really didn't see the humor in this, but I'm very sorry, about your childhood. I don't want people to feel sorry about my childhood. I want them to feel inspired to look back at their own childhoods and maybe see them a little differently, and to laugh a little bit about things that happened instead of crying.
Right. Well, I thank you so much for being with us today, Helen Peppe. The book is Pigs Can't Swim. You can find out more about Helen at helenpeppe.com, and Peppe is Peppe. And check out her Facebook page, helen.peppe too, and check out that photography because it's stunning. But they can link to that from your website anyway. Helen, thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot. And
okay.
Please do stay with us.